Now we're going to talk about how you develop your strategic and action plans for the organization. This approach can be used both for initiatives that cover the entire organization or for programs inside the organization. So if you have an individual initiative, you can definitely take the same approach. Strategic planning is really about setting a direction long-term for the organization. You want to do it in a manner where you think about what does the future look like. There are many tools and approaches to doing this, but when you start, you really need to understand your purpose and direction. And we've talked about in another segment how you create your brand, your values, your vision and mission, and so on. So all of that should be understood, agreed upon when you go into this. Then you need to understand who are the people that you want to participate in the process. It's tempting to get as many people as possible involved, but you need to make sure that the people who are part of this have an understanding of what needs to be done, they have a passion for the outcome, and they have influence with the organization. So once you have your plan together, they can go and share it with everybody. You also need to make sure that people buy into the shared vision up front. You need to have security in what it is that you're going to be doing so that people don't veer off in different directions. Then you choose an approach, and I will talk about one specific way of doing strategic planning called scenario planning, but there are many other ways of doing this, and we have some references that we'll share with you that you can see how to approach this. Scenario planning is a way that I've used in the past myself, and I really think is a good way of creating a lot of detail in terms of what could happen. In scenario planning, what you do is you think about 5-10 years down the road. What would it look like? What would the future look like? What do we want everything to be around us? And then you decide out of those, and this is a part of the planning where you involve a lot of different people and you get a lot of different inputs. So you can say, well, we want to be a totally different organization this way, or we want to be better in this way, or we totally want to change what we do because we think we've solved all the problems that we have today and we're going to have a whole different set of problems. You then narrow down the different futures that you're thinking about, and you decide which ones are we going to look at. And typically you'll choose 4 or 5 different outcomes, and you'll then create a team around each one of these and say, now tell us, how do you get to that future? What are the steps that you need to go through in order to make this a reality? In order to do that, you need to understand what are the external and internal obstacles that you're going to encounter once you start going forward and try to realize this possible future. You need to understand how you deal with those. So in our industry, we're dealing a lot with societal pressures. We're dealing a lot with people's personal opinions about animals. We're dealing a lot with people not totally trusting each other in what are the things that are going to come out of specific action. So what we want to do is we want to find out how do we deal with that. For instance, if you live in a city or in a state where there is specific legislation, that's an external pressure that you need to deal with. So you need to decide, can you influence that? Is there any way you can change that? Or is it something that you have to live with? Typically, the broader and larger the external pressures are, the more difficult it is to deal with them. So you need to decide which ones do you want to take on and which ones do you have to live with. Then you start working on what are the internal things you need to change. Put together a set of specific actions that will take you down the road, step by step, to the future that you want. And then say, these are the resources it'll take, this is what we need people to do, and come up with a specific plan to get there. This is a lot of work. You have maybe 5 different possible futures that you want to achieve. You look at comparing them, both in terms of the possible outcomes and in terms of what are really the feasibility of making this a reality in the future. It may be that the external pressures and the external constraints are too large to overcome, so you have to discard things that you really wanted to do, but once you have narrowed this down, you really come up with a way to achieve your future that have realistic steps along the way. This then, in turn, becomes your day-to-day action plan. People think very often that a strategic plan is something you create and then every year you pull it out and you say, did we get there or not? And then if it turns out that you are 90 degrees off from where you thought you were going to be, you have a lot of catch-up or changes to make. So it's really important that your strategic plans turns into a day-to-day plan. Every initiative that you start from then on has to conform to what it is you want to do with the strategic plan.